In 1922, a sealed tomb was opened for the first time in 3,000 years, revealing treasures that blew the world's mind. We're talking gold, jewels, and artifacts literally beyond imagination. But the biggest treasure and the craziest mystery was the boy king himself. How does a 9-year-old pharaoh, whose reign saved his kingdom from total chaos, end up dead at 19 in a hastily prepared tomb? The answer is an insane story of religious revolution, political backstabbing, and a death that we're still trying to solve. This is the tragic story of Tutankhamun. To get why a 9-year-old was handed this impossible job, you have to look at his dad, Akhenaten. Before King Tut, Akhenaten was a pharaoh who threw Egypt into a massive crisis. For over 1,000 years, Egypt had a whole squad of gods, led by the all-powerful Amun-Re. But Akhenaten was a heretic. In a move that completely rocked the empire, he announced there was only one god that mattered, the Aten, represented by the sun. This wasn't just a small change. It was a revolution that turned Egyptian life upside down. Akhenaten ordered the temples for the old gods shut down, their statues smashed, and their names literally erased from the walls. The powerful priests of Amun, who had been a huge deal for centuries, were sidelined and stripped of their wealth. He even abandoned Thebes, Egypt's longtime religious capital, and built a brand new gleaming city in the middle of the desert called Akhenaten. For regular people, this was a disaster. The gods they'd prayed to their whole lives were suddenly declared fakes. The festivals that marked the seasons were gone. Society was in turmoil, and the economy, which was tied to the old temple system, started to crash. Akhenaten was so focused on his new religion, he let Egypt's power crumble. To a lot of people, he wasn't a revolutionary. He was a madman who had made the gods angry and wrecked the country. When he died, he left behind a broken, angry kingdom on the very edge of collapse. And this was the world a 9-year-old kid was about to rule. When Akhenaten died, the throne went to a young boy named Tutankhaten. At just 9 years old, he was now the ruler of the most powerful civilization on Earth. But let's be real, he wasn't calling the shots. The real power in Egypt belonged to two men who were the true masterminds behind the throne. First, there was a sharp, old-school court official named Ai. He had been a top advisor for Akhenaten and knew how to play the political game. He set himself up as the boy king's guide. The second was Horemheb, the hardcore commander-in-chief of the entire army. While Ai controlled the palace, Horemheb had the military on lock. These two were the main power brokers. They saw the mess Akhenaten had made and knew things had to change fast. The country was unstable and the people were furious. The boy pharaoh, Tutankhaten, became the face of their massive course correction. One of the first big moves of his reign was a name change. He was pushed to switch his name from Tutankhaten, which honored his dad's god, to Tutankhamun, showing everyone he was bringing back the old god his father tried to cancel. The boy king had picked a side, or more accurately, it was picked for him. The restoration was on. With Ai and Horemheb pulling the strings, Tutankhamun's reign became one giant project to undo all of Akhenaten's changes. The main goal was to fix the damage by bringing back the old gods. This wasn't some quiet policy shift. It was a huge public campaign, carved forever into a massive stone slab called the Restoration Stela. This stela, found at the Karnak temple, lays out how bad things were when Tutankhamun took over. It says the temples had fallen into ruin, their shrines were overgrown with weeds, and the gods had turned their backs on Egypt. In response, the slab declares that Tutankhamun, the good ruler, had made everything right again. Under his rule, the court moved from Akhenaten's desert city back to Memphis, the traditional administrative hub, while Thebes was restored as the religious heart of Egypt. Money was poured back into the old temples, gold statues of the gods were made, and the priesthood of Amun was restored to its former glory. Tutankhamun's reign saw huge restoration projects get finished, wiping away the heresy of his father. In just a few years, the boy pharaoh's reign had pulled the kingdom back from the edge of total religious and cultural collapse. For about a decade, Tutankhamun ruled over a healing Egypt. He married his half-sister, Akhenaten, and things seemed to be getting stable. The restoration project was working. But just as he was becoming a man at only 18 or 19, the boy king suddenly died. His death was completely unexpected. It left no heir and created a power vacuum that his advisors were ready to jump into. For years, everyone wondered how he died. Was he murdered? Did he crash a chariot? The idea of a deadly blow to the head was a popular theory for a long time, but modern science tells a much more complicated and tragic story. CT scans and DNA tests on his mummy have unlocked some insane secrets. The scans show that Tutankhamun had a bunch of health problems. He had a rare bone disease in his foot, possibly Curler disease, which would have been incredibly painful and forced him to walk with a cane. In fact, over 130 walking canes were found in his tomb, which we now think were basically ancient crutches. Even more importantly, the scans revealed a severe, unhealed break in his left leg that likely happened right before he died. Without antibiotics, an open fracture like that could have easily caused a deadly infection. But that's not all. DNA tests gave us the biggest clue yet. Scientists found genes from Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite that causes the most lethal form of malaria. So, the leading theory today isn't a single event, but a perfect storm. Here was a young guy, already weak from genetic issues caused by royal inbreeding, suffering from chronic malaria and a painful bone condition. In that fragile state, he breaks his leg horribly. The combination of a nasty infection from the break and another malaria flare-up would have been too much for his body to handle. The boy king who saved his kingdom couldn't save himself. Normally, a pharaoh's death kicked off a long, fancy process. A royal tomb took years to build, and the mummification ritual alone was 70 days. But Tutankhamun's burial was rushed. His tomb is way smaller than other pharaohs, leading experts to believe it was likely a private tomb repurposed for him in a hurry. With Tutankhamun dead and no heir, his top advisors, Ai and Horemheb, finally made their moves. Ai, the old politician, went first. He took the lead at Tutankhamun's funeral, a role usually reserved for the next pharaoh, and quickly took the throne, even marrying Tutankhamun's widow, Akhenaten, to make his claim look legit. Oi only ruled for 4 years before he died, and the throne was seized by the man who was waiting the whole time, the general Horemheb. Horemheb wanted to finish wiping Akhenaten's revolution from the history books. But he went even further. To lock in his own legacy, he tried to erase the entire period, including the boy king who fixed the chaos, Tutankhamun. Horemheb usurped Tutankhamun's monuments, having his own name carved over the boy kings on buildings. Key official king lists were chiseled to skip over Akhenaten, Ai, and Tutankhamun, making it look like Horemheb came to power right after Tut's grandfather. In a final, tragic twist, the pharaoh who restored the gods was erased from memory by the same men who had advised him. For 3,000 years, Horemheb's plan actually worked. Tutankhamun was forgotten, just a lost king in a minor tomb. But that rushed, hidden burial ended up being the best thing that ever happened to him. While the giant, famous tombs of legends like Ramesses the Great were looted by grave robbers for centuries, the boy king's humble tomb was left almost completely untouched. When Howard Carter finally broke through that sealed door in 1922, He brought Tutankhamun back from the dead and made him the most famous pharaoh of all time. The treasures from his tomb gave us an insane high-definition snapshot of life in Egypt's golden age. But his story is so much bigger than his treasure. It's the tragic story of a kid who had to save a nation, a young ruler who fixed a religious crisis only to be betrayed by the people he trusted. He was erased from history, but his incredible rediscovery has made him more famous than any of them could have ever dreamed. What do you think is the most tragic part of Tutankhamun's story? The insane pressure put on him as a kid, or being completely erased by the men who were supposed to be on his side? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more of history's greatest mysteries, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.